Snow is a super type, meaning any card can gain that type, which has appeared in just a few sets of Magic. Despite its rather short run, there have been some pretty good snow cards over the course of those few sets. So today we're going to go over the best snow cards in all of Magic. And starting us off at number 10, we have Ohran Frostfang. This is a 2/6 snake snow creature with a mana cost of 3 and 2 green. It has the abilities where all attacking creatures you control have Death Touch, which means that any amount of damage they deal is enough to destroy another creature. And whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. Frostfang is a pretty great way for creature decks to draw a whole bunch of cards. The combination of its ability to let you draw cards whenever your creatures deal damage, and the ability to give all of your attackers Death Touch, means that your opponent's going to have a really hard time in combat. Anything they block is going to die, but they need to block or you're going to drown them in card advantage. Unfortunately, this card has some major drawbacks that stop it from really seeing play in most Eternal formats, mainly its high mana cost. 5 mana cards basically never see play in formats like Legacy, which have a very high power level and are full of combo decks that can kill you as early as the first turn of the game. This is kind of a big problem for the card, because it was unfortunately only printed in Commander pre-constructed decks, so it's only legal in formats like Legacy and Commander. The card would probably have a solid showing in formats like Standard if it had the chance. However, while the card doesn't see much play in Legacy, it does actually get quite a bit of use in Commander, even in CEDH, the competitive side of the format. Its ability to draw cards and make blocking almost always a losing gamble make it a great inclusion in a slower format like Commander. Now, while Frostfang never got a chance at Standard, we should give a shout out to its predecessor, Ohran Viper. This is a 1/3 for 1 and 2 green that has the form of Death Touch and the ability where whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. This card is a little weaker than Frostfang, but it did actually see play back in the Standard of its day. Overall, Frostfang is a pretty strong card that never really got too much of a chance to shine due to where it was printed. And at number 9, we have Blizzard Brawl. This is a snow sorcery with a mana cost of 1 green, and the effect where you choose 1 target creature you control and 1 target creature your opponent controls. If you control 3 or more snow permanents, the creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains indestructible, which means that creature can't be destroyed by damage or destroy effects until the end of the turn. Then the 2 creatures fight each other, which means they each deal damage to each other equal to their power. Blizzard Brawl is a really nice removal spell for green decks. Green doesn't really get normal creature destruction. The only real creature destruction they get are these fight effects. However, fight cards have some pretty big downsides, as you both need a creature on the battlefield to use them, and you might lose your creature in that fight if you're fighting something kinda big. Brawl does a lot to fix these downsides by giving your creature indestructible. Not only will this let it survive the fight, but because his ability sticks for the rest of the turn, it can also attack without having to worry at all. Now, you do need to have at least 3 snow permanents to get this value, which does hold the card back a little bit. The easiest way to get snow permanents you need is just to use snow lands, as other snow cards can easily be removed. Because you kind of need snow cards, this card's success has been pretty limited. It's mostly seen play in mono green aggro decks in Standard, who really appreciate the card's ability to remove blockers and help them push through even more damage. The card hasn't really seen play anywhere else, as green decks in other formats have better options, which is why it's relatively low on this list. And at number 8, we have Frostbite. This is a snow instant with a mana cost of 1 red, and the effect deals 2 damage to a target creature or planeswalker, but it deals 3 damage to that permanent instead if you control 3 or more snow permanents. This is another card in the vein of Blizzard Brawl, a cheap, efficient snow removal spell that's mostly seen play in Standard. 2 damage from 1 mana to a creature is a pretty standard rate for a card in Standard, but 3 damage from 1 mana is far more rare. This is a really great rate, so it's no wonder that so many decks in Standards have played this card. Lots of different red decks that were able to play enough snowlands to turn Bite on most of the time played the card, as pretty much every deck is interested in this kind of creature or planeswalker removal. Unlike Brawl, which only saw play in mono green decks, Bite has seen play in both mono red and 2-color decks, specifically blue-red decks. However, it also hasn't really gone beyond Standard, as older formats have better options, such as Fiery Impulse or Lightning Bolt. A card we should really mention here is Scred, a very similar card that unfortunately didn't qualify for this list due to not technically being a snow card. Scred is an instant for a single red mana that deals damage to a target creature equal to the number of snow permanents you control. This card has seen a ton of play throughout the years in Pauper and Modern, Mono Red, and Azet or Blue-Red Scred decks. Decks that played snow-covered lands specifically to power up Scred. Now, so far we've been talking about a few weak cards because there are only 100 snow cards and most of them are a bit weak. However, from here on out, we're going to be talking about the uniquely strong ones. And at number 7, we have On Thin Ice. This is a snow enchantment aura with a mana cost of 1 white and enchant snow land you control. It has the ability where, when it enters the battlefield, you exile a target creature until it leaves the battlefield. This is the best snow removal spell we've seen so far, and generally speaking, the best of the bunch. 1 mana is the lowest amount you could reasonably ask for a removal spell to cost. It does have a couple of downsides to balance this out. First, you have to have snow lands attached to the aura too, so you have to be playing a good number of snow lands, similar to the last couple of cards. You also have to cast it at sorcery speed, and if your opponent finds a way to remove it, they get their creature back. This does make On Thin Ice worse, but it wasn't enough to make it stop seeing play, at least until it was power crept by other white removal spells. Unlike Frostbite and Blizzard Brawl, which also required you to run Snowlands, On Thin Ice was actually played in a number of multicolor decks. This is largely due to cards like Prismatic Vista, allowing players to play a good number of snow-covered basics while still finding the colors of mana they want. Your opponent being able to remove the enchantment and get their cards back does make it worse, but you don't actually lose any card advantage when this happens, as they probably have to use an entire card to remove the aura. Now, the card has been power crept out of prominence, but no one would look at you weird for still playing the card if you had some copies and didn't have anything better to replace it with. And at number 6, we have Scrying Sheets. This is a snow land that you can tap to add 1 colorless mana. It has the ability where you can pay 1 and 1 snow mana, which can be paid with any mana from a snow card, and tap it to reveal the top card of your library. If it's a snow card, you can put it into your hand. Otherwise, you do nothing. Scrying Sheets would be an absolutely busted card if it weren't restricted to snow cards. Being able to basically pay 3 mana, because you have to give up mana from your Scrying Sheets on top of the 2 mana, to draw a card on the land that you can use multiple times is really good. It's really easy to run away with a game with that kind of card advantage. Cards like Arc of Oraska require you to have at least 10 permanents and pay 5 mana on top of tapping it to draw a single card, and that card saw tons of play in its standard format. Scrying Sheets is far cheaper and doesn't ask you to fulfill any requirements first. However, most snow cards aren't powerful enough to see play in formats like Modern or Legacy, and Sheet isn't legal in Pioneer, where the snow cards might stand more of a chance. Despite all of this, people still play Scrying Sheets specifically to draw their snow-covered basic lands in monocolored decks in Modern. The previously mentioned Scred Red would consistently use this card simply to get their basic lands off the top of their library, so they could both hit their next land drop and have a higher chance of drawing a spell on their next turn. Sheets is a really strong card that's only held back by having a very weak card pool to work with. What's worse, some of the best snow-related cards don't have the snow type. Again, Scred is one of the best snow payoffs in the game, and not being able to add it to your hand off of Sheets really feels bad for any snow fans. And at number 5, we have Ascendant Spirit. This is a 1/1 spirit snow creature with 3 activated abilities. You can pay 2 snow mana to have it become a 2/3 spirit warrior. You can pay 3 snow mana, and if Ascendant Spirit is a warrior, you put a flying counter on it, and it can't be blocked by creatures without flying or reach, and it becomes a 4/4 spirit warrior angel. Finally, you can pay 4 snow mana, and if it's an angel, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on it, and it gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. This card has a few moving pieces, but basically you can slowly make a bigger and better creature by activating each of its abilities. Actually, you can even activate the last ability multiple times, letting you stack more and more counters on it, getting more instances of its draw ability, getting to the point where you can draw 3 or 4 cards every time it hits your opponent. This card is a great early game threat for mono blue decks that can afford the snow basic lands to make the snow mana the card requires. A cheap early threat that scales into the late game is always nice. Sure, putting so much mana into a card and having it removed by a single fatal push does feel bad, but if you're smart about when you activate its abilities, you can make sure you get some of the value out of the card before it's removed. Ascendant Spirit's creature type has been useful for the card too. Spirit decks have been pretty successful in Pioneer, so the card has seen a ton of play as an early threat to pair decks with multiple Spirit payoffs. The card hasn't seen success in any formats older than Pioneer, so Spirit travel decks in Modern really want to be 2 colors at least to have access to cards like Spell Queller, and therefore can't support the snow requirements of Ascendant Spirit. And at number 4, we have Faceless Haven. This is a snow land that you can tap to add 1 colorless mana, or you can pay 3 snow mana to turn Faceless Haven into a 4/3 creature with all creature types and vigilance, meaning it doesn't have to tap to attack until the end of the turn, but it's still a land. This card has seen a ton of success in monocolor aggro decks in formats like Standard, Historic, and Pioneer. On top of the other snow payoffs, this was the main reason why aggro decks in Standard format were all monocolor snow decks, at least until it was banned for being too strong. So, why is this so good? Well, Faceless Haven is one of the latest in a long line of cards called Creature Lands, sometimes also called Man Lands. These cards are always at least good in Standard. They provide a lot of inevitability without really costing you much of anything. Even if your opponent wipes your entire board, you can still turn your land into a creature to try to get in some damage. Even better, because the card is only a creature for the turn, they're sort of immune to sorcery speed removal. Your opponent won't ever be able to kill your creature lands with something like Wrath, because they won't be a creature on their turn. So, not only is Faceless Haven a creature land, a type of card that has traditionally been very good, it's also a very good creature land. Not only is it one of the few creature lands that enters the battlefield untapped, but a 4/3 with Vigilance for 3 mana is a great rate. Putting out so much damage for solo to mana helped to make monocolor aggro decks some of the best decks in that standard. which is why the card eventually got banned. While we're here, we should mention Frostwalk Bastion. This is another snow creature land that asks for 1 and 1 snow mana in order to turn into a 2/3 construct artifact creature that's still a land until the end of the turn. It also has the ability where, whenever it deals combat damage to a creature, you tap that creature and it doesn't untap during the controller's next untap step. Bastion is also a great creature land, but it hasn't been as successful, mostly just because it didn't get a shot at Standard, and isn't legal in Pioneer. It only really gets a chance to shine in Modern, where neither card is quite good enough to see anything more than occasional play. And at number 3, we have Ice-Fang Coatl. This is a 1/1 snake snow creature with a mana cost of 1 green and 1 blue, flash, meaning you can cast it anytime you would cast an instant, and flying. It has the ability where, whenever this creature enters the battlefield, you draw a card. It also has the ability where as long as you control 3 or more snow permanents, it has Death Touch. There's a card called Baleful Strix, which is a 1/1 with flying and Death Touch that draws you a card when it enters the battlefield and costs 1 blue and 1 black to cast. This card is an absolute staple in Legacy, which is one of the few formats where it's actually legal. Rather than give us Strix, Wizards decided to give us a side-graded version of it that cared about snow permanents. Ice-Fang is as good as it sounds, considering it's basically just Baleful Strix. Ice-Fang is one of the biggest reasons players keep playing snow decks in Modern, as its ability to get you easy 2-for-1s, or even better, surprise 2-for-1s with flash is incredibly strong. There's ways to make this card even stronger, however. Since the draw a card ability only cares about Ice-Fang entering the battlefield, and not how it enters the battlefield, you can draw multiple cards by blinking it. With a card like Soul Herder, you can blink your Strix at the end of every turn to draw an additional card. This interaction was strong enough for people to play the cards together in Bant, or green, white, blue decks in Modern. Ice-Fang is a big part of making these blink-focused decks the second best deck in Modern. This card has even seen play alongside Baleful Strix in Legacy, as the upside of Flash makes up for not always having Death Touch pretty handily. And at number 2, we have Arcum's Astrolabe. This is a snow artifact with a mana cost of 1 snow mana. It has the ability where, when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. It also has the ability where you can pay 1 and tap it to add 1 mana of any color. The interesting thing about this card is that there's a nearly identical card called Prophetic Prism that costs 2 mana that sees absolutely no play. Despite this rather minute difference, Astrolabe saw way more play than Prism, up to the point where it was banned in multiple formats. So, why is this card good? Well, first off, 1 mana is a very low investment. The difference between 1 and 2 mana is huge. This card only really provides mana fixing, which isn't good for most decks, but for 4 or 5 color decks, it's essential. Allowing you to basically play as many colors as you want for a single mana is a huge boon, as even if you do have to use up 1 mana, you can easily make up for that with the raw efficiency of the rest of your deck. Additionally, since it draws you a card, you can basically play a smaller deck, as these will all cycle for a different, more useful card. Another great thing about this kind of mana fixing is how resilient it makes you to non-basic land hate. These 4 or 5 color decks are usually kept in check by cards that punish their greedy mana bases, but a turn 1 Astrolabe makes it so they'll still be able to cast the majority of their spells anyway. Even better, since Astrolabe is a snow card, you can cast your other Astrolabes off of it, so even if they get rid of your only snow land after you cast one, you can keep casting the others with no issues. This made 4 color decks incredibly hard to punish in Modern, Legacy, and even Pauper, so the card was banned in all 3 formats to stop 4 color decks from running rampant. Now, while this is impressive, there's one snow card that I think has had a larger impact on the game as a whole. And at number 1, we, of course, have Dark Depths. This is a legendary snow land with the abilities where it enters a battlefield with 10 ice counters on it. You can pay 3 to remove an ice counter from it, and whenever it has no ice counters on it, you sacrifice it and create Marital Age, a 20/20 black avatar creature token with flying and indestructible. We've talked about Dark Depths a few times when discussing other cards already on this channel, but it hasn't actually taken a spot on the list yet. For anyone not in the know, Dark Depths is a really strong combo piece that an entire archetype of land-based strategies in Legacy are built around. You see, paying 30 mana for Marital Age is a little slow, but if you can remove all the ice counters from it at once, you can end the game incredibly quickly. Cards like Vampire Hexmage can remove the counters all at once, and Thespian Stage can turn itself into a copy of Dark Depths with no counters on it for just 2 mana and tapping it. Combine this with copious numbers of land tutors, and you have a very strong, resilient, and reliable combo deck. There are multiple different builds of these land-focused combo decks in Legacy. There's Turbo Depths, an all-in combo variant of the list that tries to make Marital Age as early as turn 2. There are the value-based Silencia variants that play creatures that interact well with lands, and there are even control-based variants that try to slow the game down until they can assemble the combo. The card is incredibly strong and a big part of why cards like Wasteland are so heavily played in the format, as not being able to stop Dark Depth decks from going off, or at least winning before they can, means that your deck isn't viable in Legacy. Considering that the card is a pillar of legacy, and has been for years, it more than earns a spot as the most powerful snow card in all of Magic. Alright, and that's the list. Are there any other cards you think we may have missed, or do you have any ideas for future videos just like this one? If so, go ahead and tell us in the comments below.